何を、何を見てそれほどまでに恐怖しているのだ。地下深きところ。
Marebito is one of those movies that kinda hangs around after you watch it. It leaves this unsettling feeling that will stick with you for days. This kind of uncomfortable, uneasy feeling. And that is exactly why I love this film. Marebito is an extremely unlikely collaboration between three very talented and unique people: Takashi Shimizu, Shinya Tsukamoto, and Chiaki J. Konaka. The first of which, Takashi Shimizu, is probably best known for creating the Ju-On series, which he later adapted for Western audiences into The Grudge, which starred Buffy the Vampire Slayer, because that's all she'll ever be known for. Marebito was made at an odd time for Shimizu. The film debuted in 2004, right between the Japanese Ju-On movies and their American remakes. Marebito comes at a time where Shimizu was transitioning from very moderately budgeted Japanese movies to much higher budgeted American ones. So while Marebito has a much lower budget in comparison to both Ju-On and its remake, by this time Shimizu knew how to make things look nice. At least nicer than the V-Cinema Ju-On movies. Shinya Tsukamoto plays our lead character, Masuoka. In this film, Masuoka witnesses a suicide, which leads him to discover this network of tunnels beneath Tokyo, where he finds a very mysterious girl he calls only F. Masuoka then makes the stupidest decision that anyone would make in his position, and brings her from the underground tunnels back to his house, starting off the plot of Marebito. Of course, Masuoka is the part that Tsukamoto was born to play. His face perfectly captures how creepy Masuoka is, while still being somewhat of an everyman. Of course, this character is something that Tsukamoto is extremely used to. Tsukamoto is the director and lead villain of the fantastic Tetsuo the Iron Man, which kicked off his own career in filmmaking, and also a subgenre called Japanese cyberpunk, which, hey, who knows, I might get into later. But when he's not directing his movies, he's usually starring in movies like Marebito, basically so that he can fund his own indie projects. This is actually a stroke of genius. Not only does he get money for his films, but he also makes connections through them. For example, after starring in Ichi the Killer with Tadanobu Asano, Asano then played the lead role in Tsukamoto's film Vital. Which is big deal cause Asano's a big actor. You probably saw him in Thor and you didn't even fucking know it. Of course, a plot as bizarre as Marebito could only come from a man who wrote something as existentially bewildering as Digimon Experiments Lane. I mean, Armitage Crisis 2043. Chiaki J. Konaka wrote the screenplay and novel for Marebito, and his fingerprints are all over this. The film is built almost entirely on references to H.P. Lovecraft and his contemporaries like Richard Shaver. Throw in a multi-screen setup ripped straight from Lane, and you got yourself a Konaka story. This was a collaboration that I never knew I wanted until I got it. I was already a huge fan of Shimizu, Tsukamoto, and Konaka's work before I saw this movie. In fact, I didn't didn't even know that Konaka wrote the screenplay until I looked up information on it. Of course, after looking it up, it becomes very, very obvious what he contributed. I didn't even know that Shinya Tsukamoto was in this. Each one of them brings something different to the table, but their styles work so well that it blends together seamlessly. On top of all that, Marebito is the best Lovecraft movie not actually based on a Lovecraft book, and that's the title of the video. All the elements are in there. Our protagonist is an unreliable narrator who drifts along as the world gets stranger and stranger around him. There's this otherworldly sense to F, and later these creatures called the Deros, plus the implication that humans might have devolved from them. And there's also some references that are just not subtle at all. Of course, Marebito also owes a lot to Richard Shaver, who I'm going to assume a lot of you don't know a whole lot about, considering that this is a video about a Japanese movie and not fucking old-ass science fiction books. Shaver wrote stories more or less around the same time period as Lovecraft. However, Shaver is definitely his own brand of crazy. Shaver famously created the Shaver Mystery, which puts forth the idea that there were these detrimental robots, or Deros, and descendants of proto-humans, or Teros, living in a giant underground cave network right below our feet. Sounds familiar to the plot I just described? Probably, because it is. And the scariest thing about all this? He actually believed it. Richard Shaver spent the last years of his life studying rock books that he believed came from Atlantis. And even worse than that, there's still people that believe that Deros are a thing.
I made a video called Hollow Earth, My Encounter with the Dero. I was in my bedroom. I woke up one morning, and then my arm was twisted behind my back. And when I looked up, I seen a being with a long floppy nose and blue around the nose. The being was laughing at me with a honking, weird sounding laugh like "haw, haw, haw, haw."
But of course, Marebito uses all of its influences to great effect, with a dash of Lovecraftian horror and a huge helping of Shaver conspiracies. Marebito pulls together an interesting narrative that can be read in multiple ways. Without going into spoilers, I will say that by the end of this film, you can interpret the events in multiple contradictory ways. However, there is one plausible answer that sounds better than the rest and makes more sense, but it's also the least interesting. Still, do not let that stop you from picking apart the main character's psyche and the world around him in the later half of this movie. As I said before, Marebito leaves its viewer off uncomfortably, and this is completely intentional. Its atmosphere is oozing with these creepy vibes that give it this unique feeling. This isn't a boo, gotcha horror movie. This is atmosphere at its strangest, and the movie's constant use of Masaoka's camera perspective practically makes this into a found footage film, but it only helps to provide some of the most uncomfortably close death scenes. While Marebito is not torture porn, it is not for the faint of heart. This movie does have its fair shares of bloody scenes, and it uses them to great effect. So if you're in the mood for some atmospheric horror, check it out. A movie like this doesn't come around very often, and a creative collaboration like this happens even less. And if this video got you interested in Marebito or other Japanese horror movies, check out my channel for Japanese horror movie reviews / video essays on old as shit anime / whatever the fuck I feel like posting. Go ahead and check it out.